The sky was not normal that day. Above the alien village, dark clouds gathered like a living beast, twisting and rumbling, ready to strike. The wind began to scream, cold and sharp, pulling at the roofs and shaking every door. Everyone knew what it meant. It was the once-in-a-century storm. Old villagers whispered stories about it. How it had destroyed everything 100 years ago. Farms vanished, rivers flooded, houses ripped from the ground. They said no one survived who stood outside when the sky tore open. Now, that same sky was returning. The alien people locked their doors and ran into underground shelters. Mothers grabbed their children. Fathers sealed the food stores. Elders prayed. Panic ruled every face, except one. He was not alien. He was human, the only human in the village. He stood still in the middle of the open ground, staring at the clouds with calm eyes. His clothes flapped in the wind, and his boots pressed firm into the cracking dirt. The aliens shouted at him from inside. "Come in," they screamed. "You will die." But he didn't move. He only looked at the horizon, where the glowing green lightning danced through black clouds. Then he picked up a rope and tied it tightly around his waist. In his other hand, he held an old lantern. Its flame burned small but steady. One alien child peeked out from behind a door and whispered, "Why isn't he scared?" Her mother pulled her back. "Because humans are strange," she said. "They act brave until they break." But the human didn't break. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, into the wind, into the dirt, into the storm. No one had ever done that before. A strong blast hit him immediately. Dust and rocks slammed into his body. He leaned forward, planting his feet carefully. With every few steps, he tied the rope to a solid rock or metal post. He was leaving a trail behind him, a glowing rope. "You have hope," one alien whispered. "What's he doing?" Another said, "Maybe he's mad." The human didn't answer them. He walked on, his lantern swinging in the wind like a tiny star. Every gust tried to knock him down. Every crack of thunder shook his bones, but he kept walking. He didn't look back. Inside the underground shelters, the aliens watched from small screens and cracks in the metal doors, their eyes wide, their voices low. They had never seen a human like this before. Some had thought humans were weak, soft, unprepared for real danger. But now this one was walking into something that could kill gods. He wasn't running from the storm. He was walking straight into it, and none of them could understand why. But he knew. He had seen the old maps. He had studied the patterns. He knew where the storm would hit hardest and what it would destroy. A giant dam stood beyond the ridge, old and cracking. If it failed, the flood would wipe out the entire village. No one had mentioned it. No one had planned to fix it. No one thought it was possible. But the human did. And now he was walking toward it, alone. The storm didn't welcome him. It tried to break him with every step. The wind pushed from all sides, howling like a beast with no shape, no face, just endless rage. The human's boots sank into wet, cracking ground. Sand and sharp gravel tore at his legs. Still, he moved forward, leaning into the storm like it was a wall he had to climb. The rope around his waist tugged and snapped, but he kept tying it to strong metal poles, stones, anything that would hold. His hands bled, his fingers frozen, but he never looked back, not once. From far behind, inside the shelters, small alien eyes watched him through tiny screen feeds and cracked metal doors. They had power for only a few cameras before the storm would cut it all. But what they saw made them silent, a lone human walking into a sky that had killed thousands before. Every step was slow but sure, every motion full of purpose. Lightning flashed again, green and blue veins across the sky. It struck a tree not far from him, burning it to ash in 1 second. The ground shook. But the human didn't flinch. He covered his lantern with his body, shielding the flame. That tiny flame was his only light, and it mattered more than anything now. His mind went back to what he had seen on the old colony map. The dam, cracked and forgotten, sitting at the edge of the valley. The storm would hit it directly. If it collapsed, the flood would destroy everything in the lower land. The entire village. The aliens didn't know, or maybe they had given up long ago. He hadn't. He couldn't. With each tied knot, with each step into pain, the human thought of the children, of the old woman who had given him bread, of the boy who had drawn a picture of Earth in the sand, of the shy alien girl who had asked him if snow tasted sweet. They mattered, even if they weren't human. They mattered. The storm roared louder. Burning rain started to fall. Hot, acidic droplets from the twisted alien clouds. It stung his face and arms, leaving marks, but he kept walking. One of the alien elders watching from below whispered, "I don't understand. Why would he do this? He owes us nothing." Another older voice answered, "Maybe that's why it matters." The human reached the top of a small hill, where where he could see the shape of the dam in the distance. It looked worse than he feared. Even through the storm, he saw water bursting through small cracks, pieces of it already falling. He would have to move faster. He planted a new hook into the ground and tied off the rope. The glowing line now stretched hundreds of feet behind him, his gift to those who might follow. If he failed, maybe they'd still have a path out. If he didn't come back, at least they'd know why. The sky flashed again, thunder chasing it like a giant scream. He didn't scream, he didn't stop, because even if no one believed he could stop the storm, even if he was just one human on an alien world, even if his hands were shaking and blood mixed with rain on his face, he was already too far in to turn back, and the dam was waiting. The human climbed down the hill slowly. Each step was like a battle. The wind slammed into his chest, the rain sliced across his skin, and the rope tied around his waist dragged with weight. But none of that mattered. He had seen it clearly now, what no one else had dared to look at. The dam was huge, ancient, built before even the first alien settlers arrived in this part of the world. It was made of dark stone and metal beams, covered in green moss and long cracks. And it was breaking. Water was already pouring through tiny fractures. 1 more hour, maybe less, and the pressure would snap it in half. And when it did, a wall of floodwater would rush down the valley and crush the village like paper. He stopped for a moment and pulled out a small metal tablet from his coat. It showed the old colony map and the warning signs around the dam. He had found it days ago while helping clean the archive room. No one had noticed it. No one cared. But he did. That's why he walked into the storm. He grabbed a metal hook and stabbed it deep into the mud, tying off the next section of rope. Behind him, the glowing rope now stretched through the storm like a path of fire. Inside the shelter, the alien villagers gathered around the last working screen. The power was low, flickering, but the image was still clear enough. They saw the dam, they saw the cracks, they saw the water rising, and they saw him. One human, alone, facing it. Gasps filled the room. He knew all along, someone whispered. He tried to warn us, and we ignored him, another said. An elder turned to the group and said, "We were afraid. He was not." The camera cut out, the power finally gone. Now, all they could do was wait. Back in the storm, the human was already pulling tools from his pack: wrenches, rods, sealant paste, metal braces, scavenged pieces from broken buildings and useless storage rooms. Had carried them all this way. Even when the wind tried to throw him down, he dropped to his knees in front of the biggest crack. Water sprayed in his face, roaring like a monster. But he pressed the brace into place and hammered it down with shaking hands. One, then another, then another. He didn't care about the cold. He didn't care about the pain. He only cared about one thing: stopping the flood. He shouted against the wind, not in fear, but in challenge. The sky responded with thunder so loud it felt like the world split in half. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. He remembered the little girl who gave him a flower, the boy who asked about Earth, the old man who said humans were too soft. He remembered them all, and it gave him strength. More water poured out from a second crack. The dam groaned beneath his feet. Time was running out. He reached for another brace, blood dripping from his hand, but his grip was still strong, his spirit even stronger, because now he understood something deeper than survival. This wasn't just about saving a village. It was about proving that humans didn't run from the storm. They faced it even if it meant dying. And so, with the sky tearing open above him and the flood rising behind the wall, the human kept working, alone, but never afraid. The storm grew angrier. It was no longer just wind and rain. Now the sky turned red. Lightning flashed in colors no human had names for. Green, purple, white-hot threads that cracked across the sky like giant claws. The human stood on the dam wall, soaked, bleeding, and shaking, but his eyes still burned with focus. The water behind the dam slammed against the stone like a beast trying to break out. And the cracks, they were growing. He had already sealed 4 of them, but now new ones were opening. He didn't panic. He just worked faster. He slammed another metal brace into place. His arm screamed in pain, but he didn't stop. Rain poured down his face, mixed with sweat and blood. His lantern had fallen during a strong gust. The glass shattered, but the flame, somehow, still glowed inside the broken shell. He picked it up and tucked it close to his chest. That light was more than fire now. It was hope. Back in the village, the power was gone. Screens were dark. Lights were off, but they could still hear the storm above. The alien people sat in silence. Mothers held children close. Fathers gripped old tools they knew wouldn't help. No one knew what was happening. No one but him. The human was now at the edge of the dam's core. A massive crack had opened, water pouring out with violent pressure. He reached into his coat and pulled out his last sealant pack. thick paste that could harden like stone. He slapped it into the crack and hammered a steel plate over it. The dam groaned under the pressure, louder than before. It was alive now, fighting back. A bolt of lightning struck nearby, so close the sound came with the flash. The human was thrown backward, his body sliding across the wet stone. He hit a metal beam, gasping in pain. His side was bruised, maybe worse, but he didn't stay down. He crawled back toward the wall, hands gripping the cold stone. Another brack, another plate, another slam of the hammer. He was running out of time and out of tools. The rope tied around his waist pulled tight suddenly. The storm had caught it, parts of it snapping far behind him. His connection to the village was breaking, but he couldn't turn back. Not now. The dam shook beneath his feet. A deep rumble echoed through the ground. The final break was coming. He took off the rope and tied it around one of the metal beams instead. Then he looped it across the final brace. He didn't think about what would happen if he failed. He only thought about the lives waiting behind the hill. He screamed into the storm, not in fear, but in defiance. The storm screamed back. Rain fell harder, as if trying to bury him, but he didn't stop moving. His face was pale, fingers numb, but his will burned like fire. He slammed the last plate into the deepest crack, using the last of the sealant to hold it in place. As he hammered it down, his body shook from exhaustion. He fell to his knees, chest rising and falling. The dam fell silent. For a moment, everything went still. Even the sky paused. No wind, no lightning, no roar, just silence. And in that silence, he whispered, "Hold, please hold." Then the thunder returned, and the dam gave one final groan. The dam groaned like a living thing. Its old bones shook under the weight of 1,000 tons of water. Metal beams creaked, bolts bent, and stone crumbled at the edges. But the human didn't stop moving. He pressed his body against the cold wall. His breath came in short gasps, and every inch of him hurt. But he knew this was the final moment. This was when things either held together or shattered forever. He pulled a thick iron rod from his pack. It was the strongest piece he had. Twisted, heavy, sharp on one end, the last brace, the last nail. He found the deepest crack, wide enough to swallow a hand. Water sprayed from it like steam, hot and angry. The human placed the rod in position and raised the hammer with both hands. His muscles trembled, but his will didn't. He swung once. The metal rang out across the storm. He swung again. The sound echoed through the dam like a war cry. Behind him, the rope line snapped in two places. The glowing trail he had made was vanishing. No one would find him now, not easily. Still, he didn't turn around. He hammered the rod deeper. The water pressure slowed, but didn't stop, so he reached for one last tube of resin. He pushed it into the hole, sealing the gaps around the rod with his bare hands. The chemical burned his skin, but he didn't care. He yelled through the storm, "Just hold a little longer, just a little more." Then, a sound, louder than thunder, deeper than any voice. The dam cracked across its side like a mouth opening. A massive slab of stone shifted. The human's eyes went wide. He dropped the hammer and leaped forward. With the last of his rope, he tied himself to the final metal brace. He threw his body across the gap like a bridge. The water smashed against him. The force nearly tore him away, but the rope held, and so did he. Back in the village, the sky had turned an angry red. Children cried in the air. Armies of parents. The elders stood near the sealed door, waiting, watching the clouds. Then, a vibration ran through the ground. The walls shook. A cup fell from a shelf. Gasps filled the underground shelter. Some thought it was the end, that the dam had fallen, that the flood was coming. But nothing came. No wave, no rumble, only silence. Then, a single droplet of water leaked down from the ceiling. Cool, slow, clean. The elder looked up and whispered, "He did it. By the stars, he did it." Back at the dam, the human was still tied to the brace. His arms were limp. His legs barely moved, but his eyes were open, blinking against the rain. He looked down at the sealed crack, the still wall, the water. Was calm. He smiled, just a small one. Then closed his eyes and let his head fall forward, not from death, but from peace. He had given everything, but the dam held, and the village lived. The storm was gone, just like that. The winds that once screamed like dying beasts had faded into quiet whispers. The sky, once torn apart by green lightning and fire-colored clouds, now hung in soft gray silence. Rain still fell, but gently, like a whisper, not a weapon. The villagers slowly opened the doors to their underground shelters. Cautious hands pushed metal aside, eyes squinted at the sky, waiting for more thunder. but there was none, only the sound of water dripping, leaves shaking, and silence that almost felt unreal. Children were the first to step out. They looked around at the broken trees, shattered roofs, and empty fields, but no water came crashing down the hills. No flood swept through the village. It was still standing, alive. The elders followed, eyes scanning the valley. One of them raised a telescope and pointed it toward the dam. His hands shook as he adjusted the lens. Then, he froze. He saw the massive wall still standing. He saw cracked beams held together with metal rods. He saw a small figure tied to the top edge, unmoving. "It's him," the elder whispered. "The human. He's still there." Gasps echoed across the village. One child shouted, "He saved us." Another yelled, "He's alive." But no one was sure. From that distance, he didn't move, he didn't wave. They began to climb the hill, a group of brave ones, farmers, miners, children with wide eyes and shaking hands, following the broken rope trail that still glowed faintly through the mud and rock. The wind tried to rise again, but it had no power now. The storm had lost its battle. At the dam, the human still hung from the final brace. His body was limp, covered in mud and dried blood. The broken lantern was still tied to his waist. Its small flame had gone out, but inside him something still burned. As the first aliens reached the top, they saw him and stopped. No one spoke. They didn't know what to say. He looked like a warrior from an old story, broken but undefeated, silent but powerful. One young alien girl stepped forward and touched his hand. It was cold, but not lifeless. She looked at the others and smiled through tears. "He's breathing," she whispered. "He's still breathing." They rushed to cut the rope and carry him down, slowly, carefully, like he was made of glass, and in silence, they walked back to the village. When they reached the center, every alien had gathered. They didn't cheer, they didn't speak, they just watched him, lying on a soft blanket, lantern beside him, rope coiled like a metal. Then, his fingers twitched, his eyes opened, just a little. He looked up at the cloudy sky and let out one soft breath. "You're safe," he whispered. "Good." And then he closed his eyes again, not in pain, but in peace. The crowd didn't shout, they didn't scream, they knelt, heads low. They had feared the storm, but he had faced it. And now, they would never forget him. Not the storm, not the rope, not the flame, but the human, who walked into the sky's fury and won. Days passed. The storm was gone, but the memory of it still hung in the air. The village was quiet, not from fear anymore, but from something deeper. Respect. The human lay in a healing tent, wrapped in warm cloth, his body covered in salves and bandages. He barely moved, but he was alive, and that was enough for now. No one disturbed him. Instead, the aliens worked quietly outside, building something just across from the shelter. Wood, stone, and metal were shaped not into a house, but into a monument, a tribute. Children carried stones, old warriors lifted beams, artists carved symbols into smooth plates. At the center of it all stood the broken lantern, placed on top of a carved stand. The flame inside it had died. But now, they lit a new one beside it, not fire, but glowing crystal, something that would never go out. It was called the Flame of the Fearless. Beside it, a rope coiled in a perfect circle, and carved into the stone below were words in both alien and human script. He walked into the storm so we could live. Inside the tent, the human finally opened both eyes. He blinked, looking around confused at first. Then he saw the small alien girl beside him, holding a cup of warm broth. She smiled and whispered, "You're awake." He tried to sit up, but pain held him down. She placed the cup in his hands and said, "You don't have to walk anymore. We're safe now." He gave a small laugh, weak but full of life. "I was worried," he said, "about the dam." She nodded quickly. "It's still standing, because of you." Outside, the villagers gathered. When he stepped out, weak and limping, they didn't cheer or cry, they simply bowed their heads, one by one. He looked at the monument and didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, he whispered, "I didn't do it alone. The storm gave me pain, but you gave me a reason." The elder stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You were the reason we're still here, and we won't forget." Word of the storm and the humans' stand spread beyond the village. Other colonies sent messages, ships arrived with gifts, some asked for his story, others offered him medals, but he never asked for reward, he only asked for one thing, to rebuild the dam properly, so no one ever has to do what I did again, and they listened. In time, the storm became legend, and the human became more than a visitor. He became family. He He built a home, taught the children, helped grow crops, and on stormy nights, when wind tapped on windows and clouds gathered above, the children didn't cry anymore. They would look out and say, "It's just the sky trying again, but it won't win, not while he's here." And the elders would nod, because they remembered the man, the one who tied a rope to his waist, held a small lantern in the dark, and walked into a storm that tore the sky apart, not for glory, not for fame, but because he couldn't let others die while he could still stand. That's the story they told, and that's how he was remembered, the human who faced the storm and never looked back.